In the winter of 1987, Tom Selleck stood at the absolute pinnacle of Hollywood. Magnum P.I. had made him the most recognizable face on American television, a symbol of effortless masculinity that millions worshipped from their living rooms every single week. Producers were throwing blank checks at his feet. Studios were calling his agent before dawn. The mustache alone had become a cultural monument, imitated by men from Detroit to Dallas who believed that if they grew it long enough, some of that unshakable confidence might transfer. But behind that sun-bronzed certainty, behind the easy laugh and the shoulders that seemed architecturally designed to carry the weight of any room, Tom Selleck was quietly, desperately afraid that none of it was real. That one morning, the world would simply look closer and see what he had always believed. A boy from the San Fernando Valley who had spent his entire life performing a confidence he never actually felt. And the most devastating detail? The role that was supposed to crown his career, the one that would have made him the biggest movie star on earth, had already slipped through his fingers forever. Not because he lacked talent, not because he failed an audition, but because he had done exactly what a loyal man does, and Hollywood punished him for it anyway. There is an irony in Tom Selleck's story that hurts too much to be coincidence. The child who grew up in a house where love existed but emotional approval felt like weather, unpredictable and impossible to hold. The teenager who discovered that standing in front of people, inhabiting someone else entirely, was the only moment the internal noise went silent. The icon who built an entire career, from Magnum P.I. to Jesse Stone to his legendary westerns like The Sackets and Crossfire Trail, on projecting a confidence so immaculate that the whole world mistook the performance for the man. All of that so that life would eventually place Indiana Jones in his hands and then remove it. All of that so that the actor who looked like he had never lost anything would spend decades quietly understanding what loss truly costs. How does a boy from a comfortable California suburb forge something as earned and weathered as Tom Selleck's career? What lived beneath the charm that cameras fell completely in love with? What happens when the loyalty that defines a man becomes the very wall that traps him? And what does it cost in the private mathematics of a life to be beloved by tens of millions while feeling fundamentally unknown by the people who matter most? To understand all of that, we need to go back to the beginning, to Detroit, Michigan, to the early 1950s, and to a boy who learned, in the quietest and most suffocating way imaginable, that being enough was something you had to prove every single day, in every single room you entered. Thomas William Selleck was born on January 29, 1945, in Detroit, Michigan, the second of 4 children. His father, Robert Dean Selleck, was a real estate executive, a methodical and emotionally reserved man who provided stability the way certain men provide silence, thoroughly, consistently, and without unnecessary commentary. His mother, Martha Jagger Selleck, managed the household with the particular competence of women in that post-war era who understood that domestic life was its own demanding career. The family relocated to Sherman Oaks, California, eventually settling into the San Fernando Valley, into a world of manicured lawns and post-war optimism that looked, from the outside, like the American dream rendered in stucco and relentless sunshine. There was no poverty here in the traditional sense. No coin counting at the kitchen table. No winter without heat. But there was something more quietly corrosive than material lack. Something that leaves no visible marks on the body, but carves deeply into the architecture of a child's self-belief. There was emotional distance dressed as respectability, a household where achievement was expected, where the structure of provision substituted for the rawness of expressed affection, and where vulnerability, if not openly punished, was certainly never welcomed at the table. Tom was tall for his age, almost absurdly so, reaching 6'2" before most of his peers had finished being boys. And here is where adolescent cruelty becomes surgically precise. He was too big, too visible, too geometrically impossible to ignore. Not celebrated the way athletes eventually are, but notice the way anything outside ordinary becomes a target first. Classmates found sport in his height, in his angular, unfinished features, in the specific awkwardness of a boy whose body had arrived years before his confidence had any right to follow. He moved through those school years carrying the particular loneliness of someone who is always seen but never truly known. He was not the class president. He was not the magnetic center of any room. He was the boy standing at the edge of the photograph, already calculating the fastest route toward the door. Years later, he would confess with a directness that clearly cost him something to deliver, "I was very insecure." I think most people who go into acting are in some ways trying to find a place where they fit. The words carried the specific weight of a confession made long after the wound had scarred over, but never fully closed. At 17, his first real dream collapsed without drama or ceremony. Basketball had offered him something intoxicating, a context where the height that made him strange might finally make him valuable. He was good, genuinely good, but not great. And in the ruthless mathematics of athletic scholarship, good is simply another word for not enough. The path closed quietly, and Tom Selleck, standing at the uncertain edge of his own story, was about to stumble into the only world that would ever truly make sense of everything he carried. With basketball closed and no clear road ahead, Tom Selleck discovered acting almost by accident, the way most profound things arrive, not through planning, but through the quiet desperation of having nowhere else to turn. A drama professor at the University of Southern California noticed something in him during a general studies class, something the boy himself had not yet identified. He encouraged Tom to audition for the theater program. Tom, with nothing to lose and no better idea forming, said yes. And when he stepped onto that stage for the first time, something shifted in the atmosphere of who he was. The insecurity that had followed him through every hallway of his adolescence, the height, the awkwardness, the feeling of permanent displacement, none of it followed him into the character. On stage, he was not too much. He was exactly enough. For a boy who had spent 17 years feeling like a problem that needed solving, that silence of self-doubt was not a small thing. It was everything. It was not talent yet. It was recognition. The silent, absolute certainty of having found the one place on earth where everything that had made him strange suddenly made him magnetic. At 22, with a headshot and a hunger that no comfortable suburban upbringing could fully extinguish, Tom Selleck began auditioning in Los Angeles. The city in the late 1960s was not kind to unknowns. It was a place that absorbed young hopefuls with the cold efficiency of a machine designed specifically for that purpose, taking in dreams at one end and producing rejection letters at the other. The city did not welcome Tom Selleck with applause. It welcomed him with silence, which is somehow worse. He appeared in commercials, cigarettes, products that required a handsome face attached to no particular personality. He washed through small television appearances, blink-and-miss-it roles that paid barely enough to justify the gas to the studio. He shared apartments with other actors equally hungry and equally stubborn, men who fell asleep each night rehearsing lines for auditions that would likely lead nowhere. There were nights counting coins to reach the end of the month. There were mornings reading rejection in the faces of casting directors before he had finished his first sentence. For 7 years, the breakthrough refused to arrive. 7 years of almost, of nearly, of doors that opened 2 inches and then closed completely. Most men would have recalibrated. Most men would have found a different door entirely. Tom Selleck was not most men. Then came 1980. Then came Magnum P.I. The role of Thomas Magnum, a private investigator living in Hawaii with an easy grin and an unshakable moral compass, fit Tom Selleck the way certain roles only fit certain people once in a generation. It was not merely casting. It was recognition on a massive scale. The show premiered and within a single season became one of the most watched programs in America. Tom Selleck was suddenly not just working. He was iconic. The mustache, the Ferrari, the Hawaiian shirt, the particular combination of physical confidence and emotional warmth, it created something the television landscape had not seen before and has not quite replicated since. And then came the phone call that would define his career in ways no success ever could. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas wanted him for Indiana Jones. The role was his. The deal was essentially signed in the air between conversations. But Magnum P.I. had a contract clause, and CBS would not release him. Tom Selleck, a man defined by his loyalty and his word, honored the contract. Harrison Ford stepped into the leather jacket. Raiders of the Lost Ark became one of the highest-grossing films in cinema history. He would say years later, with a measured calm that suggested he had made a private peace with it that cost considerable effort, it was the right decision. I made a commitment. But yeah, it stings. 2 sentences. An entire universe of disciplined grief, compressed into 11 words. What followed was not a collapse but a redirection, and this is where Tom Selleck's story becomes something richer than a Hollywood rise. He turned to westerns, a genre that fit the architecture of his values better than any action franchise ever could. The Sacketts, his early western alongside Sam Elliott, built a devoted audience that has only deepened with time. Crossfire Trail, Last Stand at Saber River, Monty Walsh, The Shadow Riders, film after film in which Selleck inhabited men of principle navigating landscapes that demanded everything and forgave nothing. These were not decorative roles. They were expressions of a value system. Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott became across these westerns a kind of living argument that masculinity rooted in integrity rather than aggression was not only possible but deeply compelling. His personal life carried its own weight. A first marriage to model Jacqueline Ray in 1971 ended in divorce after 11 years. In 1987, he married actress Jilly Mack, and together they built something quieter and more durable than Hollywood typically allows. A ranch in California, a daughter named Hannah, a life deliberately constructed at a distance from the machinery of celebrity. Then came Jesse Stone. Beginning in 2005, Selleck produced and starred in a series of television films based on Robert B. Parker's novels, playing a damaged, alcoholic small-town police chief with a stillness that revealed everything about what decades of craft actually produces. The Jesse Stone films became a phenomenon of quiet loyalty, audiences returning not for spectacle, but for truth. At an age when Hollywood typically stops calling, Tom Selleck was delivering the most nuanced work of his career. Today, at 79, Tom Selleck carries his history visibly and without apology. The man who felt too large for every room he entered became the man no room ever felt complete without. From a boy rehearsing certainty in a San Fernando Valley bedroom to an icon whose westerns trend weekly, whose Jesse Stone films are discovered fresh by every new generation, whose presence in a frame still communicates something language cannot quite reach. The scars are real. The losses are real. The Indiana Jones door that closed and never reopened is real. But so is this. A man who kept his word when breaking it might have made him a movie star, and who discovered that integrity, lived fully over decades, creates something more enduring than any franchise ever could. What lesson do you take from Tom Selleck's story? How many times have you honored a commitment when walking away would have been easier and found later that the road it closed led somewhere you were never meant to go? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories of those who transformed quiet losses into lasting legends. Because in the end, as Tom Selleck's life reminds us, with every frame of every western he ever rode through, the measure of a man is not the roles he lands, but the ones he chooses to walk away from with his character still intact.